Right.
Welcome, everybody. We're so excited you're here for a messy kickoff party. This has been a party waiting to happen, and we're going to have a lot of fun tonight. I am so excited to see these names that are chiming in. And for those of you who are trying to figure out how to get on that thread, if you'll sign into your YouTube account with your Gmail, you'll be able to make a comment there. But I've seen people from Rapid City, South Dakota, Janet, Cindy from All Souls Presbyterian in Urbana, Illinois, Susan Peck from Greenville, South Carolina, and Tamara, I'm not going to say your last name right, Tamara from Lethbridge, Alberta, Canada. I saw Susan Hunt, the old lady, as she calls herself, is on tonight. Kathy Wargo. I saw Patsy Kuipers come in. And one of the things we want you to do tonight is to make a comment. Let us know where you're listening in from. I'll prompt you to put a couple of other comments up on the screen. And at the end of the night, we're going to give away 4 prizes to 4 different women. You can see them on the screen. And they all have a little something to do with cleaning up a mess. We have a bath bomb set. We have a set of towels that match the book cover. And then we have, I love Mrs. Meyer soaps and lotions. That smells so good. And you're going to get a chance to meet Abby Hutto in a second. And you're going to get a chance to win her book tonight, God for Us. Because, of course, God is the one who cleans up the mess. But it wouldn't be a party if we didn't invite Susan Tyner to come on. So, Susan, welcome.
Hey, there Karen, I'm so glad to be here.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here too. I want everybody to know a little bit about who you are and tell everybody a little bit about the backstory of how this book, let me make sure I get it in the screen, came to be.
Well, where do I even start? Many years ago, I lived in Mississippi, and I was on staff at a church, and I was always looking for Bible studies. And a lot of times I just ended up writing my own Bible study for the women there. And of course, they were very patient with it not being professional. And they just were along on the ride with me. So eventually, when I moved to Texas, I obviously did not work anymore in that transition. And I thought, well, if I'm ever going to write a Bible study book for real, this is my chance to do it. And that was about 3 years ago. And it has been, a bumpy ride, but here we are. And I can't believe it. I cannot believe it. I told my husband, Lee, I will believe it when the book is in my hand. Because so many things have, like anything in life, don't quite work out how you pictured it. And so even the fact that this is the book, I really had an idea for a different book. And so I don't know if you can relate to that, listeners, but seems like God had a different plan than my plan when I moved here.
Yeah, for sure. And there was also that whole holy gift of nudge thing, because as Susan and some of the other people who are getting ready to be on the screen with you know, that I love seeing people steward their gifts. And so being able to hold this book, I always have to think opposite, is a sweet gift to me, to be able to see Susan's work in print, and now knowing that there are over 2,200 women as of this afternoon who picked up a copy of the book. We have women that are studying this book along with you from 43 states and 10 different countries around the world. And that's just a little foretaste of heaven, that we get to do this together. So we're so excited. We hope that you've been able to get those weekly e-blast, and that as you go to that www.pcacdm.org/messy, that you're finding everything that you need. In fact, I got an email from a woman today that does a long commute to work, and she just said, thank you so much for having a podcast this time so I can listen as I go. I don't have time to watch the video. So whether you're watching the video together as a group, you're listening to the podcast, maybe when you take a walk or washing dishes, we're so excited that you're along for the ride. But it wouldn't be fun if it was just Susan and I. So I want to invite 2 of our other friends on. They're very special ladies, Ronjanette Taylor and Abby Hutto. Welcome. We're so glad you're here.
Hello.
Yeah. Hey, what? Let's start with you, Ronjanette. Tell everybody a little bit about who you are, where you live, and maybe how you know Susan.
Well, yes, I'm Ron Jeanette Taylor. I live in Flowood, Mississippi, and we've been here since 2000. So I'm originally from St. Louis, married to Brian Taylor, and we have 3 adult children and 3 grandchildren. And I know Susan through women's ministry, being here in the state and having her to be a regional advisor for our region for a season, and just serving on the team with her has just been such a joy and such a blessing. And then just being, from Mississippi and spending time in Mississippi, we've had a chance to just grow in our fellowship and in our relationship, and it continues to today.
It's so good. I love it when Susan says, I got to run something by Ron Jeanette. Like, we're not doing it until I run it by Ron Jeanette. So we count on Ron Jeanette's wisdom. That's wisdom right there. Okay, well, you've already heard her laugh. Her name's Abby Hutto. Abby, tell everybody where you're from and how you're connected to Susan.
Yeah, I'm also from Mississippi, but I now live in Westerville, Ohio, and I am the director of spiritual formations at Story Presbyterian Church. But I'm a big Susan Tyner fan. So we just have met. We met through what the CDM puts on an event every year, a training for women who are on staff at PCA churches. And I met Susan, and I really admired her and was honestly hopeful that she would maybe pick me to be her friend. But we actually became friends because I went to her feeling like a very messy mama in and of myself, like with my parenting, and just went to her for advice. And she was so gracious and kind and prayed with me and has continued to pray with me and for my kids ever since. So she's a beautiful, beautiful mama to many.
She is. And I love when those women get together because I pretty much know where the party is because I can hear Abby down the hallway. And I know the party has gotten started. And it's just kind of like a party on wheels for several days. But those women come, they bring, how they're serving in the local church together. And it's a sweet sisterhood. What Ron Jeanette talks about on our national team is another sweet sisterhood that, listen, we're all a mess on both of those teams, but, save Jesus. But that's what bonds us together. And, we want to talk a little bit about, I had a woman say to me when she read the title of the book, what's she doing here? And she's like, is that mean? Is that ironic? Or is that the truth? And I'm like, that's the truth, And sometimes we feel that way too. Like, how did I get in this group of people? Because we all bring our mess in. So I thought it might be fun tonight to start off, and I'd love for you to in the chat column to share your own little story if you want. And feel free, women are competitive. If you want to top somebody's story, that's fine. This can be a funny story. This can be a serious story as well. But I asked our friends tonight, what is the biggest mess you've ever made in your life? I'll start off for a second. We love to host things in our home. And, a lot of times you're trying to clean up the mess real quick, before everybody gets there. And I was trying to make a chocolate cake. I was a little bit behind before everybody got there. And my mixer propped up and it kept going. So if you can imagine what chocolate cake batter looks like on the ceiling, on the floor, on the cabinets, it was like an I Love Lucy moment. The more I tried to clean it up, the browner it was, the worse it was, the slicker it was. And during the I think it was probably like a visitor dinner. During the visitor dinner, I kept putting my hand somewhere and looking and seeing more cake batter. So the pervasiveness of the mess was everywhere. And that's really kind of a picture of my life. So, Ron Jeanette, do you have a story about a mess?
It's not quite a story, but any time that I'm in a messy situation, it's because it always leads in from a position of overcommitting myself.
Okay.
Just regardless, some overcommitment, going, man, I'm not going to be able to see this through, and then just trying to force myself through it. Every mess has at its core for me some position of overcommitting, or really wanting genuinely to do a good thing in most cases, but it always ends up being, there's a mess that happens, and that's usually at the core.
Oh boy, I can definitely relate to that. That's why we always say, well, what does Bryant think? You know, when I asked you to do another thing, what does Bryant think? Abby, how about you? You got a messy story?
Yes, like when we first moved to Ohio, we were traveling down. We were supposed to go down for Christmas to see my family, and there was a storm coming through West Virginia. So we have to drive, from Ohio down through West Virginia to get to my family in Charlotte, North Carolina. And I told my husband, I was like, we can beat this storm. Like, if we wait for this storm to go through, we're going to miss like 3 days with my family. And I don't want to miss time with my family. And he kept saying, Abby, I just don't think that's wise. And I was like, we can do it. And I got out the timed weather chart and showed him, like, we're going to make it. We're going to be through West Virginia before it even one flake falls. Should have listened to my husband, but I didn't. And so I got us all packed up. And as soon as we hit Beckley, West Virginia, so if any of y'all have driven that West Virginia turnpike, we were coming like around these curves, and it just dumps on us. And unbeknownst to us, we found this out later, an 18-wheeler turned sideways and blocked the turnpike, and traffic was backed up for miles and miles. And so we sat for about 6 hours in a blizzard. And the whole time I kept thinking, Lord, please help me never do this again. Like, I want to submit to my husband every time this was wrong, and I'm sorry, and I learned my lesson. But by God's grace, we didn't happen to be, God placed us near a turnaround, and 6 hours into the storm, we were able to edge over, turn around, get back to Beckley, West Virginia, where we spent 2 days in the, whatever motel would accept us. And so we missed that time with my family either way. So I would love to say that I learned from that mess and have submitted to my husband ever since, but that would not be true. But I do think of that turnpike, and it does oftentimes, the Holy Spirit reminds me gently of that moment. And I remember and hopefully choose to do different.
Oh my goodness. There's all kinds of spiritual lessons in the middle of these messes. No doubt about it. Okay, Susan, how about you?
I think my messiest story that is coming to mind, because with 5 kids, I did have a lot of messes. But the one that I just picture and can still see is probably almost 30 years ago. I was very, very, very pregnant with my number 2. So I was so desperate to take a shower that I left my number 1 child, who was 2, just for like 5 minutes by himself in his room so I could just jump in the shower. And I jumped out and I walked into the room, and he had taken his dirty diaper and painted all over the windows. Like an artist, so tickled with himself. And I remember thinking, I have to clean that up. Like, there's no other adult in the room but me. And I wish, I don't remember what happened, but I think I probably cried. But he didn't do anything wrong except be an artist with the medium he was given.
Oh my goodness. The bookends of these stories. So we start out with chocolate cake and we end with that story. And both of them are all over all of the brown messes, all over all of the surfaces. So I love some of these stories. I love this. Wendy says, I'm a mess. Just about every time I push a shopping cart, I find myself saying, rules of the road, people, rules of the road. And Wendy, I can relate, especially during COVID with the whole directional thing in the grocery store. We got the mask on, our glasses are fogging up. We don't know. We don't even know what we need, right? That's why so many people did grocery delivery, because, they're like, I can't handle going to the grocery store. Another one of our friends talked about how Jesus has walked her through the mess of going through cancer. Another one of our friends says, I've lived in, I think it was 14 different states over 12 years of marriage. And so she's got that pilgrim, mindset, but yet there's still a mess. And so all of these things that we're talking about are part of God's story, even though we're laughing like it's our story to tell. And those of you who are studying along with us, you're looking at chapter 1 and chapter 2 in the book. And chapter 2 talks about God's story. And I love how Susan just frames God's whole story. If you got not only your book, but then you got your covenant timeline. Let me get y'all. I know y'all can make fun of me that I don't know which direction. This is the
You're
big story of
good.
the Bible. It's God's story, and in his grace and in his love, he writes us into the story, and it's his narrative that we're living out, that is for our good and for his glory. And yet, I don't know if you can relate to this, friends, but sometimes when I sit with women, we have our own narrative for our story. Like we've written our story. In fact, my college roommate, I'm going to out her right now. She had a scrapbook. Okay. Back in the day, we put things in a scrapbook, it wasn't just, everything wasn't digital. And she would go through magazines, and she had a narrative for what her wedding was going to look like, where she was going to live, what her first home was going to look like, down to like the dog she wanted. And the bottom line is sometimes rarely our narrative works out the way we want to. And sometimes that's what our prayer life looks like. We're praying our narrative to God. Here's my story that I want you to accomplish in my life, God, and I want you to put your stamp of approval on it. So friends, what can you relate to that, first of all? And, what do we do when our narrative goes off script? And anybody who wants to answer. Yeah.
Yeah, I will. I'm excited because I'll have a chance to do this study one-on-one with a really dear sister in Christ. And it's been a long time since I've done just something one-on-one with someone. And we have, this is almost like the launching into a new phase in our relationship. For many years, I kind of had a way that I wanted to be viewed, or just she calls it my representative. My representative was the person that most people saw. And so through these last couple of months, the Lord has just kind of been stripping that away and calling me and drawing me to be who he has made me to be. And so I love the idea of her story in the book, God's story, and then your story, which means that, like you said, Karen, we're in this story. We're a part of it. But the beauty is it's a bigger story than just us. So, I can be myself and read along with, one of the women who are exemplified in this story and find some, something in common. And then also the commonality of the grace of God just right there for me, that I probably wasn't pursuing. I had an agenda, I had an idea of what I wanted things to turn out to be, but it's just that graciousness. And so as my friend and I will together take this journey through the study, we're both looking forward to repeated instances of having whatever our plan was to sort of be stripped away, where we can really, really be in the presence of the Lord and allow him to teach us and use this study to grow us up a little bit.
I love it. And you're doing it together. You're seeing that story unfold together, which is, what we love about doing, this whole denomination-wide study again this summer, just the beauty of studying the content of the gospel and how God's unfolding the story in the context of community. How about you, Abby? What happens when the story goes off the rails?
Yeah, I think I'm pretty typical. I think most women tend to see the tendrils of like, well, if this doesn't work out, then this is going to happen, and this is going to hurt, and this person's going to be sad. And, we really do care about all the connections that one event can have for many people. And I think God's made us that way because we are relational and we are, connected to one another. But I think for me, like, one of the struggles that my own heart has is, but if the story goes off the rail, God, I'm not sure how you're going to redeem it. I'm not sure how it's going to become this like beautiful thing in the end. And I think Susan had me at the intro when she talked about how God isn't calling us to be these beautiful, spotless, like perfect portraits on a wall. He's inviting us to come sit at his table, and being face to face with him and in relationship with him. That's all the redemption I truly need in this moment. Like one day I will get to the end of all things and see how it all turned out. But right now the gift is his face. It is his presence. And I love this book that Susan's put together for us, because how many of these women knew how their stories were going to be woven into the story of Jesus? I mean, really only one of them. His mama. And so like you look at their stories and you realize they had no idea the beautiful redemption that God was going to do in them. And it gives me hope that I can live with unfinished things. And I can be content in that, knowing that I have a God who loves us to the end. And I can trust his heart, even if I can't see how the story's going to turn out.
Ooh, I love that. That's so good, Abby. How about you, Susan?
Well, I mean, exactly what Ron, Jeanette, and Abby just said. That's what I say.
Ditto. Yeah.
Ditto them. But yeah, I would say mine boils down to control. And I think a lot of us, especially in America, have the illusion of control. And really what the pandemic did was really start pushing that reality away. The fact that I could not buy toilet paper was like, what? Like, what world am I living in? I mean, we're so spoiled that we get to just get toilet paper wherever we are, you know, and things like that are really good reminders. I think also just the fact that there can be a story where I'm not driving the storyline is scary, is very scary. And then when God sweeps in with that comfort of, but he is, and you can see it or feel it enough to calm down, then it's very humbling. And it's then the safest place I feel, because honestly, nobody I know, as much as they love me, can make my story okay, except God.
So true. And yeah, I love what you said. Like in 2015, nobody said, in 5 years, I'll see myself, you know, trying to go through the grocery store down the right aisles looking for toilet paper. They did not, with a mask on, they did not see themselves there. So there's a gap between what they expected and what they were experiencing. And that's why understanding the big story of the Bible, creation, fall, redemption, and consummation, can bring us comfort. So I'd love for us to just share for a second, like, how does understanding that big story, how did that bring you comfort over the last 15 months in the big mess of the fall called COVID-19? So how about you, Abby?
Oh, yeah. I think just remembering that ultimately this big story that God is telling is one told from a heart of love. Like it was hard to remember that in a lot of moments when I felt like, this is really hard. What you've called me to do is so outside of my gifting, so outside of my comfort zones. And I'm terrible with details. So trying to homeschool 2 high schoolers was hilarious and ridiculous. So there are just so many times where I was like, God, this cannot be a good story. I think they need to repeat these grades, but they don't. And just
School's
to remember that school's out, we're done. Just to remember that the story is being told from a heart of fatherly love, that he's not going to do things to us that are unnecessarily cruel or unkind, because he really does care for us. And that just remembering that has really helped me remember that I'm not living in a horror story. I'm living in a love story.
I love that. Yeah. How about you, Ron, Jeanette?
Well, during these last 15 or so months, I mean, the Lord has really pursued me from a position of pruning in one sense, helping me to feel that he is trustworthy, that hard things will happen. Some of them were very close and personal. Others were just as we watch things happen in the world. And so just day by day, learning that the Lord is trustworthy. And I know I feel like I knew that all along, but under the circumstances of everything, the way he has shown me and the way he's pursued me, I could really resonate with each and every one of the women in this story of just the Lord's pursuing of them. And it's amazing. I know people said this with the Ephesians, with the Hinge study, but it feels like this book was written like somebody knew, you know, that this was going to be happening. Well, God knew, but I'm saying, you know, people ask us with the Hinge study, did you all know? Did you know that this was going to happen when you wrote the Hinge study? But that's the way it feels like with this book. It's just like, man, how did Susan know? Like, how did anybody know that we were going to need to read about these women in these phases and stages of life, and they're nestled inside of this genealogy of Jesus, which is just a beautiful picture, and just that pursuing for me, I think, through this period of time with all of the isolation and just being able to hear the Lord's voice in some of it very hard ways with the pruning and the disciplining, but then in other ways just really loving, feeling like, my daddy was wrapping his arms around me and telling me that he was there and he was trustworthy.
Oh, I love that. Even in the pruning, which means great fruitfulness in the days to come in your life, Ronjanette, which we pray for. How about you, Susan? I mean, even the timeline of when this book came out, of in your life, I'm putting you on the spot, but like when we thought how this was all going to roll out.
Yeah, I mean, it's really just like God does things. He puts water on a bunch of wood and lights it to have a sacrifice. Like he makes it look like I'm going to take the most impossible situation and bring about something. And the book is a taste of that. And that I believe Karen asked me to do this as my dad was really sick. And I was driving to Mississippi to help while he was really declining. We didn't really know it yet, but and just in the weeks as I was in and out of my parents' house, actually, this book was a sweet gift. It was something that I was able to talk to my daddy about. He was such a man of the church. He loves God's church. He, just would have done anything for it. I grew up just seeing his love for the church. I think that's really why I love to support Karen and what she's doing in the church, because of him. And so the fact that I had this little project between moments of helping just to kind of squirrel into and just focus on God's big story, because whether it's my daddy who died, whether it's a pandemic, this big story lets me zoom out and know that all of this is one story. Like it feels like my whole world. But when you look at my story with all these other stories, you can see it is just one little place. And then, and I think the other thing that was really good about the pandemic is I guess I noticed more nature. It meant more if we were having a rainy day or not, because that meant we could be outside or not. And seeing how God's seasons did not change just because the news was scary. God still had birds. They could care less about a pandemic. They were still flying. The bugs were still carrying little bits of twigs around my patio. And just the continuity of, look, this is nothing for God. This is like a blip on the screen, folks. And so between the pandemic being so scary when I turned on the TV to but yet God has the world turning, to my daddy knowing that his story is still happening, even though I can't see him.
That's right. And really, your dad and your mom's fingerprints are all over the book. And so that they're part of that big story that unfolded, that we are getting a chance to see the stewardship of. Well, I hate for the party to end, but I'm going to have to say goodbye to Ronjanette and Abby. Thanks for joining us tonight. We loved having you.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah.
Bye. It was fun.
Yeah, it was fun. One of the things I've loved is watching your stories in the comments. I love the fact, and we want to continue to just fuel that flame of you sharing your stories in the context of your group. And you can find in the book, Susan encourages you on just a few pages in. It says #HerVoice, and it's an opportunity to tell your story in 1 to 2 minutes in the context of your group. So take some time, if you're studying this as a group, to begin to share your stories and begin to connect to how your friend who's sitting in the circle with you, how her story is connected to God's story. And we want to give you an example of that tonight from Megan May. She's going to share a little bit of her messy story. We're going to encourage you. I'm going to put this up online tomorrow on our Facebook. If you want to share #HerVoice or #HerStory on our Connect Facebook page, we'd love to share your stories throughout our whole group that has thousands of women that are part of it. But for now, we're just going to listen to Megan May's story.
Hi, I'm Megan May, part of the national team in the Northeast region, church planting wife and mom of 5. And I don't know about you, but this year has felt more messy than normal. I have felt more messy than normal. I think it's because there's a lot of new places where I've stepped in to do things that I've not done before or where I have less experience. And in those places, because things feel messier, I feel messier, and I act messier because I'm responding to those things around me, but also because in me, I feel like I've forgotten who I am. And so this last year, we've done a lot of new things at church, or a lot of new things in our home with the kids around the table, learning at home. And there's been a lot more meals and a lot more laundry. We have moved, and that sure creates a lot of mess. But the beautiful thing has been in the midst of the mess, I have looked at all these things that feel out of control or don't feel normal or where I don't know things. And it's caused me to say, what do I know? Who do I know? Where is my true stability? And so because everything else was shifting, it actually caused me to look up and see the one thing that was true and secure and faithful and unchanging, the one whose grace was sufficient. And he invited me into restoring and seeing the way he renews. He loves the new mornings and the fresh start of each day. He invited me to remember his sufficiency, and beyond that, his greatness. He didn't just say, we're going to get through this mess. Actually, I'm with you in this mess. I can't love you more, but I can't love you less because you're messy. And that has been such a good reminder to me as a messy woman who's showing up and disheveled and not doing everything that I've been most comfortable doing, but instead stepping out in faith into those places where I have to rely on his grace and his power in my weakness.
Oh, we love Megan May. She is our regional advisor for the Northeast. And as her video is going on, I'm seeing shout outs from the women in the Northeast who love her. So share your story. Get to know one another. It's been a long time, 15 months for a lot of us since we've been together. So it's a great way to just use this tool to connect with one another. So Susan, we got another one of these coming up, June 22nd. The title of it is The Beauty in the Midst of the Mess. And tell everybody a little bit about who's coming next time to the party.
Oh, I'm super excited about our guests for next time. They are two friends of mine. I've known them for years. They're both artists. And I love artists in the church. Just like we're talking about, God has a big story. I feel like God puts artists among us to be the illustrators and to kind of give us fodder for our imagination so that we can put ourselves in the places of the Bible. So I'm excited about Eden and Susan who'll be joining us.
It'll be a great time. Mark your calendars. It'll be in your e-blast. We'll send you the link. But we've got some winners tonight of things that are going to go out. So Heather Hunt from Buffalo, New York is winning Abby's book. We're going to get that in the mail to you. Alicia Wallace from Brandon, Mississippi, who goes to church with Ronjanette Taylor. You are going to win the bath bomb set. So I hope you have a big bathtub that you can take a bubble bath there. Jane Deal from Lawrenceville, Georgia is going to win that cute little towel set. And Beverly Barnes from Whitehaven, Pennsylvania, you're going to get that Mrs. Meyer set. And we're going to get all those things in the mail to you. Thank you so much for coming. This was a great fun. Next time, invite a friend, and we'll see you on June 22nd.